Okay, here's our overtime questions. We didn't get to any on the show, but this is what overtime is for. Keith Ellison, this is for you. Isn't the last frontier of racism in this country manifesting itself in the treatment of Muslims in America? I would say Muslims and atheists.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't know if it's the last one. I hope it's the last. It would be great if it were the last. I got a feeling that, you know, from time to time, we just pick a new person to sort of persecute and scapegoat.
But even Muslims are above atheists because they are people of faith. Even, well, yes, they are.
Yeah, but how many of atheists are being detained? How many of them have been spied on by the CIA
right.
and in the New York
well,
Department?
But then again,
I mean, it's kind of different.
Atheists didn't. I mean, there are certain
Muslims didn't. Muslims didn't either. I mean,
no, that's true. That
some homicidal maniacs did, and but I will agree.
In the name of Islam, and it is a little more.
So what? I mean, so what? The name of
not a so what?
I mean, no, it is a so what because you know, because look. The guy Barney Frank in Norway, what does it matter that he slaughtered 70 people? You know, what in the name of?
I think it matters that he was motivated by a distorted form of Christianity.
Right.
And I think it's worth pointing that out.
I actually don't.
And disowning.
I don't put him in the, there's not one Christian person who I hold responsible other than Andrew Breivik, and it has nothing to do with his religion.
I agree.
And it has everything to do with his wrong.
Well, that's a little naive.
No, I mean, I don't think it is naive.
The hate comes from the Holy Book.
It doesn't come from the Holy Book.
It sure does.
It absolutely does.
It comes from a distortion.
And I must be getting a bad translation again.
Well, how often have you read it there, Bill?
I've never read it in Arabic.
Let me tell you.
I'm believing people
I've read
who read
the Quran every single year since I was 19 years old. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
There's nothing in it that says...
Well, let me put it this way, Keith. Let me put it this way. I don't think I'm responsible for what Anders Breivik did in Norway, okay?
Me either.
But he was motivated by a strand within Christianity that I recognize is authentically Christian and did also hideous things in the past. And I think you can't understand him without saying that. And that is not a criticism of all Christians, but it is saying, look, there are strains in this religion which have to be acknowledged, recognized, and gotten rid of.
Can I add
just
on this,
disagree.
Keith, let me throw in the feelings I have as someone who's Jewish at some of the fanatics in Israel who have attacked innocent Arabs. And I think in all three cases, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, I'm sure it's true. It's true in India, where you have religious fanatics, Hindus and others. Yeah. When people misuse something you believe in and invoke it, you then do have a responsibility to be critical of them. I don't think you can simply say, well, that's irrelevant. I think there is often a failure on the part of people to challenge their co-believers and to go a little easy on them. So it's not irrelevant that people have done it in the name of the religion. It's a challenge, but it's true of Islam, of Judaism, of Christianity, of Hinduism in India.
But I think it's also true of atheism. I mean, Stalin and Pol Pot were atheists. They
didn't do it in the name of atheism. It's a little different.
But they did it in the name of their philosophy.
They did it in the name of communism, and yes,
that was a state religion.
Which includes atheism.
Let me agree with Keith. Yes, I think it is a shame of some people on the left that they did not challenge Stalin and Stalinism and apologize for it. And the temptation to apologize for your own is a serious problem that cuts across it all.
Yeah, I could go on forever arguing that point, but let's just agree to disagree and say religion's evil and move on. And to the next question.
Bill, one thing on your side.
Extremism is evil.
One thing on Bill's side. There are still people in Russia who miss Stalin. They tend to be the Orthodox religious people. It's the old traditionalists who the nostalgia for the old days, unfortunately, comes from some of the, like Solzhenitsyn, who was a religious fanatic.
And the emperor here, what they did was much more in common with the religion than with atheism. The emperor was a god on earth.
Yeah, but Hitler was an atheist.
First of all, Hitler was not an atheist.
Yes, he was.
Well, there's a lot of controversy about that. He courted the Catholic Church a lot.
He defeated the Catholic Center Party. That's where the Nazis came from.
But we're arguing about a point we don't have to argue over. Look, fundamentalists who believe that they can kill to make you agree with them are the problem. People of faith, I don't think are.
No, but they should be challenged by people who share their faith. And I do
agree.
Criticize people who people are just too soft on their own.
Well, let me tell you, that's why
people in our business are always talking about how they fight their enemies.
You're right, most Muslims, of course, are not terrorists, but I have found a lot of very reasonable, moderate Muslims who, if you say to them, do you think someone, if they insult the Prophet, has what it's coming to them if they get injured? They'll say yes.
Well, I say no.
I know you say no, but there's a lot of Muslims who say, yeah, you know what, if you insult the Prophet, that's on you.
But let me just say this. When that guy Terry Jones wanted to burn Qurans, and actually did, you didn't see any Muslims in the United States doing anything rowdy or crazy. I mean, look, it was hurtful, but we observe the fact that he has a right, his First Amendment right, and just sort of verbally use our free expression rights to say that it's wrong. And a lot of other people of faith joined. But, you know, this is another problem.
But in America, Bill, you don't get in trouble for insulting the Prophet. You get in trouble for questioning the Prophet motive.
Well, that I agree with, too.
What does the panel think of Mississippi rejecting the personhood amendment? I think it's fantastic.
Thumbs up.
The fact that Mississippi, I think it's one of the 2 states I've never been to as a stand-up comedian. I've never been to Alabama or Mississippi. I was always afraid.
You need to go to both.
I'm going to go there now.
Well, let me say, because
I'm going to go down to Mississippi.
I was in Mississippi in the summer of '64. I think both the Mississippi and the Ohio vote are very important politically, because it is clear that a lot of people in America aren't happy with the way things are going. The Republicans won in 2010 because of that. But the danger for them, which I am glad to see, is that they have been too extreme in their reaction to it. And both in Ohio and Mississippi, what you saw were people in Ohio, many of whom I think may think the unions went too far, but the extremism of the reaction got them. Similarly in Mississippi, people who were opposed to abortion voted against that. And I think this is where we are. You see this in the Republican presidential debates, that the extremism that has taken over the Republican Party is becoming politically more of a liability to them than the abuses in which...
But actually, Bill, I agree. But I actually thought this amendment was kind of really a positive thing in a way, because what it did was it unpacked the fact that there is no moment of conception, that the line when a human life comes into being is a very blurry one, and that fertilized eggs in the womb sometimes attach, sometimes don't. Yeah. If you really believe that the fertilized egg is a human person, a woman's womb is an abattoir, is a concentration camp murdering millions of human beings. Now,
God is the biggest abortionist of them all.
I don't think we should be more moral than God. How's that? I mean, our standards for human life should not be higher than God. And when you look at that, you see, look, nature's complicated. Now, I happen to be someone who thinks all abortion is wrong. I believe that human life is really sacred. But I also understand that human life exists in another person's body, and she has a right to her own property in her own body. And I also believe that and that's a political matter, but I also believe that it's obviously true that there is a moment. I mean, the old Catholics, Aquinas, people back in the Middle Ages, they were smarter. They said quickening. At somewhere in the first trimester, we can say a human being evolves. It's only it's the modern extremist conservative ideology, starting with Ratzinger and John Paul II, that's taken this to an insane.
And let me throw in one other piece when you said it. One of the things about this was, and one of the problems people who want to make abortion criminal have is, how do you avoid, if you believe that, prosecuting the woman who's consented to have an abortion? If you believe that abortion is taking innocent life, then a woman who goes voluntarily to have an abortion is as guilty as a mother who brings her 3-year-old to a football coach in Pennsylvania. And the issue then becomes, for them, how do they deal with that? They avoid it. But the Mississippi issue brought that out. Under that constitutional amendment, the women would have been criminals.
And there's a great merit, in a way, of this extremist stuff, that it outs the fact that this argument doesn't really work in the end. You take it to its logical extreme, you have to start walking back.
And that, by the way, and that's also why those elections were so significant for 2012. Look, Democrats have trouble trying to say everything is wonderful, and the slogan "things would have been worse without us" is never anything that anybody wanted to put on. That doesn't go on a bumper sticker. But on the other hand, the response is, wait a minute, things may be tough, but these people are nuts. That's a better one.
Yeah, the great irony Barney points out is that Roe v. Wade is the best advantage Republicans ever got, because it protects them from themselves. Yeah. If they were out in every state passing these kinds of incredible laws, they would be hated as a political party. Roe v. Wade protected them from themselves. You're so smart.
Yeah, but
you always are.
But I also have to say, I don't think Obama's going to win on these people are crazy. I mean, he has, and I hate to say this, but he's been a coward on a couple of fundamental issues. He has no policy or proposal for tax reform. Everybody acknowledges this tax code is a fucking nightmare.
Unlike which president who did, Andrew?
Well, I'm sorry.
No president has.
But he's he.
Well, but no president has done that. But the other thing I would say,
Okay, fellas,
why not?
I don't think
talking about
Obama's going to win
taxes,
this. I'm talking about
I'm
Congress.
dozing off.
Yes.
It's at the congressional level.
I gotta go. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you being here. Thank you, audience.